Chicken giant Tyson Foods says it's closing 4 processing plants, including 2 here in Missouri.
And it breaks my heart because it's our history. I've lived here my whole life, and I hate to see it go downhill.
Did you ever imagine a day when Americans would worry about not having enough meat to eat? That day is here. And it's not happening in some far-off place, but right in the heart of the United States. As Tyson Foods, the giant of the meat industry, quietly shutters plant after plant from Arkansas to Pennsylvania. A silent earthquake is rippling through supermarkets, restaurants, and the kitchens of millions of families.
Tyson Foods says it is closing 4 locations, including a plant in our area.
More than 360 people will be impacted once the Tyson plant behind me closes.
This is no longer a story about the global market. It's about what's inside your own refrigerator. Meat prices are soaring, supplies are shrinking, thousands of workers are out of a job. And now 7 states are teetering on the edge of a food shortage, while retaliatory tariffs keep tightening the noose of instability. If you've been thinking this was just a temporary hiccup, it's time to face the truth. What's really happening in America? And why right now could it be threatening your very next dinner? Number 1, Virginia. Virginia may not be the nation's top cattle state, but it's one of the states most dependent on Tyson Foods for supplying mid-range grocery chains, family-owned restaurants, and community kitchens. So when Tyson announced it would completely shut down its chicken processing plant in Glen Allen, it set off a domino effect that froze large portions of the state's retail and distribution network. Unlike agricultural production states, Virginia imports most of its meat through an interstate distribution system. But Glen Allen had long been a critical hub for stabilizing supply within a 150-mile radius of Richmond, the state capital. When the plant closed, Tyson orders came to a halt, disrupting a web of local distributors overnight. Dozens of grocery stores had to post purchase limit signs on chicken products. A restaurant chain in Norfolk canceled more than 300 orders in the first week alone because it couldn't find a safe, certified replacement supplier. A hospital in Fairfax even had to adjust patient nutrition plans after running out of contracted fresh chicken. Worse still, the state's logistics network suffered a chain reaction. Small trucking companies lost their Tyson contracts, and hundreds of drivers were sidelined with no loads to haul. The impact didn't just paralyze the food sector, it stripped income from supporting industries as well. And the harsh truth is, this wasn't a natural disaster. It was the result of cost-cutting decisions triggered by U.S. trade tariffs on Tyson's overseas suppliers. When import costs for protein powder, poultry feed, and packaging equipment spiked, Tyson chose to pull out of lower-margin states, and Virginia was on that list. The real question is, why should ordinary people pay the price for policymakers' mistakes? Tyson had no legal obligation to stay. But the distribution system should have had a backup plan. Rather than forcing residents to stand in line for chicken or settle for lower-quality products just because we're out. Virginia isn't starving today. But without preparation, a protein shortage in daily diets could quickly become reality. And once meals lose their nutritional balance, public health will suffer, medical costs will climb, and working families will face a double burden. Do you still believe your neighborhood grocery will be stocked every week? Are you sure tomorrow's dinner will look anything like tonight's? Number 2, Kansas, in Emporia, Kansas, a small town surrounded by endless fields. People didn't need the evening news to know something was terribly wrong. All they had to do was look at the Tyson Foods plant. One day the trucks stopped rolling. The machinery went silent. Workers no longer lined up for the morning shift. Then a layoff notice appeared on the gate. Quietly, without a press conference, without warning. 809 jobs vanished overnight. No one saw it coming. No one had time to prepare. And in a town whose economy depends almost entirely on meat processing, the plant's closure felt like someone had cut the main artery. But the real story isn't just about the number of jobs lost. The bigger question is, why would Tyson shut down a facility in the very heart of America's agricultural belt? Was it because costs had gotten too high? Was the market shifting? Or, as many suspect, was this the direct backlash of a chain of tax and trade policies now coming home to roost? Since steep tariffs on steel, aluminum, and imported raw materials were imposed, countless food processing businesses have struggled to keep production costs in check. Machinery is more expensive. Packaging costs more. Transportation prices have jumped. And for Tyson, the only way to stay afloat was to trim the fat. Shutting down plants with thinner profit margins or those too far from export hubs. Emporia fit that profile exactly. The fallout came fast. First, beef prices in the region began climbing. Local supermarkets like Dillon's Hy-Vee and Walmart had to truck in meat from other states, adding 8–12% in transportation costs. Small grocers cut back on fresh meat altogether. Family dinners in Kansas suddenly became harder to put together. For retirees on fixed incomes, this wasn't just about higher prices. It was about whether they could keep eating meat at all, or if they'd have to settle for cheaper, less nutritious substitutes. Second, the local supply chain slowed to a crawl. Cattle farms around Emporia, once steady suppliers to Tyson, now had to scramble for new buyers. Some ranchers sold off herds below market value. Others halted restocking, entirely unsure what the next few months would bring. And what about the people? Imagine the hollowed-out feeling of a town when jobs, income, and faith in the future are drained away. Cafes grow emptier. The local school board talks about cutting its budget. A sense of abandonment spreads, like someone far away decided this place was no longer worth investing in. Do you live in a place like that? A small community that once felt secure, now shaken by decisions made in distant boardrooms? But hold on. Does it have to be all bad news? Is there something worth holding on to? In the middle of this crisis, something unexpected has started to happen. A handful of small local businesses are joining forces to build small-scale slaughterhouses or reinvest in community farming models, connecting consumers directly with farmers. This could be the first step toward a new path for Kansas, one that's no longer entirely at the mercy of corporate giants. The situation is undeniably harsh. But in the wreckage of the Tyson plant, there might just be fertile ground for something more resilient to grow. And you? If the largest employer in your town shut its doors tomorrow, would you have a plan? Number 3, Pennsylvania. On the map of the United States, Pennsylvania isn't the nation's meat processing hub, but it is a massive consumer market, home to millions of residents, hundreds of hospitals, schools, restaurants, and a dense network of frozen food distributors. That's why almost no one noticed at first a quiet shift that was about to shake the entire East Coast supply chain. Tyson Foods quietly pulled out of all its distribution contracts in certain suburbs of both Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. No formal announcement, no press release. Just the absence of trucks that once showed up daily, now gone without a trace. You can see it right at the freezer section in many Pennsylvania supermarkets. Some cuts of fresh chicken that were once household staples are gone, or if they remain, their prices have jumped more than 30% in just a matter of months. But this isn't simply a story about missing products. What makes people uneasy here is the silence. Why would a corporation like Tyson withdraw from such a large consumer market when there's no war, no natural disaster? Many analysts believe the answer lies in Tyson's restructuring of its logistics network, under pressure from rising fuel cost tariffs on imported materials and an unstable labor market. Long, costly distribution routes, like those reaching deep into the Northeast, are now being cut without mercy to protect profit margins. So who pays the price? Small businesses that relied on Tyson for a steady meat supply, school cafeterias that now face delivery delays, low-income families forced to stretch their budgets to afford more expensive groceries. And then there's the creeping sense of loss of control. When something as simple as a pack of chicken breasts or a tray of ground meat starts to feel like a luxury. Yet something interesting is happening. Tyson's absence, instead of sparking pure panic, is pushing Pennsylvania's local distribution chains and consumers to adapt. Food cooperatives are making a comeback, places where residents can sign up for weekly meat deliveries from local farms. Some smaller supermarkets are partnering directly with regional producers, bypassing the national giants entirely. This model is still new and far from a complete replacement, but it raises a big question. Is relying on corporate giants like Tyson really the safest option? And if Tyson never returns, could Pennsylvania rebuild its own food ecosystem? One that's more sustainable and more resilient? The answer is still uncertain. But one thing is clear. Every crisis leaves behind two things: loss and opportunity. What would happen if your city suddenly lost its usual supply trucks? Would you adapt the way Pennsylvanians are beginning to? Or would you keep waiting for the big players to come back? Players who perhaps never will. Number 4, Iowa. Iowa. The heart of American agriculture, where every sunrise comes with the sounds of cattle, the hum of farm machinery, and the earthy scent of hay. But in mid-2025, right in the peak season for market-ready cattle, something absurd happened. Thousands of steers had reached their ideal weight. Yet no plant would take them for slaughter. Ranchers couldn't sell. Consumers couldn't buy beef. And this vicious cycle started with one unexpected decision. Tyson temporarily halted operations at its Storm Lake beef processing plant. Not because of a shortage in supply, not because of a natural disaster or disease outbreak, but because Tyson could no longer turn a profit. Crippling fuel price hikes, combined with import tariffs on machinery and equipment from Asia and Europe, had driven operating costs at the plant to unreasonable levels. In a leaked internal report, Tyson admitted it could not maintain minimum profit margins while running outdated lines in Iowa, especially when competing against cheap imported beef from South America. And so the production line stopped. Here's the problem. Iowa isn't like consumer-heavy states that can adapt by shifting supply chains. Iowa is a producer. When its processing hub shuts down, the entire ecosystem grinds to a halt. Ranchers are forced to hold on to cattle longer, pushing feed costs higher and increasing the risk of disease. Some small farms have had to cull early because they can't afford to maintain their herds. Meanwhile, beef from other states is being trucked into Iowa's supermarkets at prices 18–22% higher. It's a bitter irony Iowa produces beef, yet its residents are eating imported beef at inflated prices. Consumers are left asking, where's the meat? How can store shelves be empty in the middle of America's farming heartland? The answer isn't simple. America's food supply chain has been designed to be overly complex and heavily dependent on giants like Tyson. Pull out one key link and the entire system collapses. And no one knows exactly where to point the blame. Is there another way? Thankfully, yes. In the middle of the crisis, a network of family-run farms in Iowa has started teaming up with food tech startups to build localized processing and distribution systems, free from corporate control. Several local universities are also funding farm-to-table projects aimed at shortening the distance between producers and consumers. It's still a long way from replacing Tyson, but it's proof that when giants withdraw, the gap can be filled, if local communities are willing to work together. Iowa's story isn't just about beef. It's about independence, about whether an agricultural community can survive, and even thrive, without leaning on global conglomerates. Do you think the federal government should step in to support local processing plants? Or is it time for people to carve their own path and stop waiting for someone else to save them? Number 5, Arkansas. Here's something most people don't realize: Arkansas is the birthplace of Tyson Foods. For decades, the state was seen as the company's untouchable stronghold, a place immune to any cost-cutting strategy. But that's no longer true. In early 2025, Tyson announced the closure of 2 plants in Van Buren and North Little Rock. The shock wasn't just about the nearly 2,000 workers losing their jobs. It was in the unspoken message even Tyson's hometown is no longer off-limits. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the result of mounting pressures, import tariffs on raw materials, skyrocketing domestic operating costs, and shifting consumer markets in the post-pandemic economy. Arkansas's problem isn't like Iowa's or Pennsylvania's. It's not about losing access to markets or supply shortages. It's about losing trust. The belief that a corporate giant will always stand as the backbone of its community. In Van Buren, people once believed that if a crisis came, Tyson would protect its hometown first. But when the plant shut down, no detailed explanation was given. Just a list of names on the layoff roster and a few impersonal HR emails. The prevailing feeling wasn't just surprise, it was betrayal. In small-town grocery stores, owners began to worry about declining spending. Losing a paycheck didn't just mean less money. It meant losing the habit of shopping, the ability to pay bills, and a place in the social fabric. Local banks froze small lines of credit. Some shops started closing earlier than usual. A sense of doubt spread. If Tyson can walk away from its own hometown, who else do they really care about? State officials didn't respond quickly. The only relief package was a retraining program, but many older workers couldn't take part. They'd spent 20 years on a poultry sorting line, and now they were being told to learn coding. It felt alien, hopeless. Is there still hope? Yes, but it's coming from an unexpected place: the very people left behind. A small group of laid-off workers formed a food cooperative in Fort Smith, using their know-how to build a small-scale production model, selling directly to schools and farmers markets. No cutting-edge tech, no deep pockets, but plenty of grit. The project is modest, just enough to keep a few dozen families afloat. But it delivers something no corporate plant could give them: the sense of owning their own future. And that raises a much bigger question for the entire country. Is the future of agriculture and food still in the hands of giant corporations? Or is it shifting toward local communities? Self-reliant, adaptable, connected, and less vulnerable. If even Arkansas, Tyson's home for nearly 90 years, can be left behind, then nowhere is truly safe anymore. So what do you think? keep waiting for the giants, or turn back toward community, toward ourselves? Number 6, Indiana. In America's meat supply chain, Indiana isn't the biggest producer nor the largest consumer, but it's home to one of Tyson Foods' key distribution hubs, a strategic link connecting Midwestern plants to retail centers all across the Northeast. When Tyson abruptly shut down its main logistics facility in Shelbyville, the whole system seemed to splinter overnight. Not long ago, hundreds of tons of chicken and beef moved through Indiana every day, packed, lightly processed, and sent on to states like Ohio, Kentucky, even Pennsylvania. Now those refrigerated trucks are far fewer. Part of it is the plant closure. Part of it is Tyson's decision to restructure shipping routes to cut fuel costs and sidestep new taxes on logistics services. The impact has gone far beyond state lines. Supermarkets across the region, from big chains like Kroger to small corner stores, are now scrambling for stock. Many have been forced to replace Tyson products with smaller, less reliable suppliers whose prices run 20–30% higher. Shoppers aren't just facing empty shelves. They're facing the reality that the everyday cuts of meat they once bought at modest prices have turned into luxury items for the average household. In Indiana, Tyson isn't just a meat supplier. They're the circulatory system of distribution. And when one major artery is cut, the disruption doesn't stop in one state. It ripples through the network, pulling other states into the shortage spiral. This story isn't over. Because the closure in Shelbyville isn't just about staffing issues or financial efficiency. It signals something bigger. Tyson is deliberately shrinking its domestic footprint to shield itself from the risks of tariffs and long-term inflation. In other words, instead of expanding to serve the US market, they're pulling back to protect profits. And the ones paying the price, communities like Indiana, where people still line up outside the grocery store only to find there's not enough left to buy. If a single logistics hub can paralyze supply for the entire Northeast, you have to wonder just how much faith are we putting in a system this fragile. Number 7, Missouri. If you walk into a small market on the outskirts of Springfield, Missouri, you'll notice something strange. The meat is still on the shelves, but the sellers stand idle. No one's buying. Not because prices are unbearably high, though they have risen, but because people no longer trust the quality. That meat no longer comes from Tyson, a brand they've relied on for 2 generations. Missouri is one of the states that has long depended on Tyson for chicken and beef in local retail systems. But in July 2025, Tyson announced the closure of its processing plant in Dexter and a scale-back of operations in Sedalia. More than 200 workers were affected, yet that figure hardly captures the shock the market endured. Missouri's biggest problem isn't a shortage of meat. It's a shortage of meat that meets the standard. When Tyson pulled out, retailers were forced to source from elsewhere: chicken from South America, frozen beef from Canada, even from lower-grade domestic slaughterhouses. The result was a clear drop in quality. At times, entire batches were found to be expired or improperly stored. And it wasn't just consumers feeling uneasy. Schools, nursing homes, and hospitals that had long-term contracts with Tyson were suddenly scrambling to find new suppliers. Without time to vet quality or adapt to new systems, they became indirect victims of a supply chain crisis born from economic policy. The trigger U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum imposed on trade partners in early 2025, driving up the cost of building and repairing Tyson's facilities. To ease the pressure, Tyson pulled out of areas no longer delivering high returns. And Missouri, with its modest population and high logistics costs, became the chosen casualty. The question is, if a corporation can withdraw based solely on a profit spreadsheet, what else can we count on? And if today it's meat, what will it be tomorrow? Eggs, milk, rice. What's more troubling is that no one is taking responsibility. State officials merely express regret. Tyson stays silent. And the people of Missouri, proud of their simple living and honest meals, are left to bear the cost of decisions signed thousands of miles away. Do you feel like control over your own dinner table is slipping away? When a giant like Tyson Foods shutters plants across the country, the impact goes far beyond unemployment numbers or meat prices. It exposes a bitter truth. America's food system is dangerously fragile in the face of policy shocks. 7 states, 7 different slices of America, are now feeling the ripple effects. No one knows what comes next. But one thing is certain: the dinner table, once the simplest part of daily life, is becoming a test for the entire system.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.